Hi there, I'm Luna Anna of lunalouiseanna.com. I'm a quantum hypnotherapist and healer, and as always, it's my honour to serve the empowerment, enlightenment, and equality of women on this planet. Thank you for joining me for this video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the father wound and some of the issues that can come from having a father wound. So, a little bit about what it is. I'm going to share what the common narrative is of what it is, and then I'm going to share my perspective because I often have slightly different perspectives to the common narrative. So I'd like to share that with you all. I'm going to give you some examples and I'm going to talk about what it really is, and then one big pitfall of having a father wound that is something that is well worth being aware of. You may actually already be aware of this yourself, I guess, if you've been called to this video. Maybe you've done some work on the father wound yourself, or maybe it's not a term that you're familiar with and you're just interested. Whatever reason you have for being here, welcome. It's lovely to spend this time with you. Thank you for coming and listening to me. Okay, so the common narrative of what a father wound is when you've had a father, and we all have fathers, whether they're in our lives or not. So whether your father was in your life or not, you've had one that didn't behave in the way that you wished that they did. And this has caused your inner child to be wounded, to be upset. And when that happens, you have a dysregulation within you that can cause unbalanced ways of being in the world. And so father wound is commonly thought to be, sort of the fault of the father, if you will. It's because they didn't do this, they weren't around, or they did do this and this was terrible. And all of that may well be true. And I certainly don't take away from that. I have great respect for that journey of healing that people go on when the father hasn't been around, or has been around but has been unavailable in some way, or maybe they've even, been abusive. I myself have had that experience. So my relationship with my father was not a good one. He abused me and he knowingly allowed other people to abuse me as well. However, he died and passed to spirit in 2017, and I've worked with his spirit. I've completely forgiven him. I understand all about why it happened. And more than that, I just have a feeling of peace around it. So although I'm talking about he openly talking about what he did, I always like to just kind of to reinstate that he is forgiven, because it's very important. Forgiveness is very important. And he is forgiven, and I know that he loves me and that he did love me, and I love him too. So bless his soul. Yeah. So I just like to do that because, even when somebody's passed, it's they still warrant respect in my view. Yeah. And so he still has my respect. So and I had his permission from spirit to talk about it. So I have actually had permission. So that's another way in which I've respected him within this. Okay. So yes, we had this, this what would be classed as not a good relationship at all. It was abusive. He was even though he was at home, he was very absent from my life. And I've got a twin sister who he had a very good relationship with. So that was very painful for me to have somebody who, to a child looks just like me, but was chosen and I wasn't. That was a very difficult dynamic for me to have with him. So I would have what you would call a father wound, meaning that circumstances has caused me some kind of damage or some kind of conditioning, programming that means that I'm not responding to life in the healthiest way possible. Now, I just want to give a slightly different perspective on this, because all of that, if you listen to that, an awful lot of the blame and responsibility lies at the foot of my father. And some might say, well, that's right, because he did do wrong things, and he did. And I think it's important that, we allow him to have taken responsibility for that, which he has done, which is how we've actually reached, the point of forgiveness, is because he did take responsibility for it in the end. He atoned for it from spirit whilst he was in spirit, actually. So, yes, it's true that the person has to take responsibility for their side of things and their actions. However, I want to just talk about all of the wounds that show up in our lives that get triggered by a person or a situation, a circumstance, something that happens to us, an incident, whatever it is that causes us upset, pain, hurt, trauma, those kind of things. Because what actually happens is we arrive on the planet and all of those things, all of those wounds, all of that pain, all of that hurt, all of that dysregulation is actually already within us. And all that happens with these people, whether it be a father or anybody else, they are curated by your soul to come along at the right time, the exact moment in time when it's meant to happen for you. And they are supposed to activate that pain, that dysregulation, that damage, those wounds, in whatever way you agreed with your soul and their soul is the best way to get the best outcome in terms of evolution and healing. So the really horrific stuff, and I have experienced some really horrific stuff in my life. It's not that it was against me or designed to ruin me. It's actually designed to wake me up. It was designed to wake me up, and it was designed to spark that point in my evolutionary journey. So it was designed to take me on a path of healing from what they did to me. So they're responsible for what they did, but I'm responsible for the healing that comes from that. And being responsible for the healing is the thing that gets you the best outcomes. And it's also the fast track way. You know, we all know, because we've all had things, you know, I've had things where I just, God, I just can't forgive. I can't let go. Oh, God. You know, we've all had things like that happen to us. And we know that it takes a lot longer when we're in that state. Whereas when we're in a state of allowance and accountability, things resolve much quicker. And sometimes, you know, it just so happens that it's going to be your life's work. So I've had an awful lot of abuse, for example, and it just so happens that it's going to be my life's work to unravel from all of that. And that's quite freeing to know that I've got my life to work through it. So there will be some things that are just too big and they're going to take a bit longer. But there are other things whereby if we're in a state of allowance and accountability, we can move through them quite quickly. So what does it show up like then? What is this father wound? What does it look like in action in your life? It's essentially really just the activation of the awareness of a dysregulated masculine energy within you. So we all have different energies within us, and one of those is the masculine, or sometimes referred to as the yang. So when that's balanced and regulated and healthy, you will be accountable, responsible, confident, assertive. You'll have a balanced logic, so you won't be just logical. There'll be like a discernment within that. And lots of other things, like you'll be stable, so you'll have such a level of stability that even the most huge emotions can't knock you off your feet. Yeah, they don't completely throw you or overwhelm you. And that is a sign of having this balanced, regulated masculine energy within. Now, when it isn't balanced, it does all kinds of naughty things that can cause havoc in our lives. And that can look like, you know, everything from freeze trauma response, where you're just not able to do anything, to the other end of the spectrum where you're overdoing. So, you know, maybe you can't stop going to the gym. Maybe you can't, maybe you're a workaholic. Maybe you just have to have something in your diary and something going on all the time, all the time, all the time. You've got to be busy. That is a sign of an out of balance masculine energy. And likewise, if you just can't get going and you just can't do things and you just can't get past things, and even the most basic things are so hard for you to function with, that can also be a sign of a dysregulated, out of balance masculine energy. And what I really wanted to come and talk about today is something that's very common that can happen as part of this, particularly if there was child abuse, and it came from the father. So what can happen is we can fall into this thing where we have something called limerence. And limerence is really relates to a romance. However, I'm also going to share how it can relate, it can translate outside of romance as well. So limerence in romance is where you are either in a relationship with somebody or not. So it could even be that you've got a celebrity that you really fancy. And instead of it being a healthy relationship and a healthy way of relating and seeing the person, it's unhealthy. So that will look like things like obsessively thinking about them, not being able to be without them, um, having fantasies about them that just aren't true. And really, all this limerence is the projection onto another human being how you wish they were, instead of being present with how they truly are, the real them. So you will have seen and this is why I'm going to talk about how it can happen in different circumstances as well. So it's for, because the word limerence, of course, contains romance. So it's said to be about romance, but it can translate into other circumstances and situations in our lives. And, like for example, if you've got children, if you've ever had your child at school and somebody's child is really, really naughty, and the parents just no, 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 they just cannot and will not see that at all. And I know, okay, we could say that's being protective and loving your child, but when it's to that extreme that it's actually not best for the child, that is like a form of limerence, but without the romance. Yeah. So it's this projection that, they're perfect. And really, it's just the fear of being around anybody that isn't perfect and that isn't going to meet your needs and that isn't going to be everything that you wish they would be. And this is not a healthy way of relating. If we relate healthily, we can just be with the person exactly as they are. And relationships are not about, what a person can give you. And I think this is something that's often very missing in the world. People think that every relationship is about what that person gives to you, whether they're giving you time, attention, whether you're sharing hobbies, goals, anything like that. It's not about what the person can give to you. It's about who they are and how that relating to them makes a container for love, and that the love within that container makes you grow. And so, a person, it's no good looking for somebody who's ideal for you, because ideal really means that you're comfortable. And if you're comfortable, you're not really going to be growing. So I'm not saying to be in relationship with people you don't like, or no. Again, this is not about extremes, because extreme is always the ego. Yeah. Anything extreme is always ego. So it's not about extremes. So it's not about, well, I can only be with this person because they're going to be with me 24/7 and it's going to be this fairy tale romance and they're going to do everything for me and our life is going to be perfect. That's an extreme. So that's a dysregulation and it's a form of limerence. And likewise, it's not the other extreme where I don't need anything from anybody. That's the other extreme. So limerence is just being delusional about who the person is in order to try and protect your fears of not being loved, not having a happy life, not getting the happily ever after, not having your needs met. And this is why it's so prominent in people who have a father wound or indeed a mother wound. Because, if you haven't had your needs met as a child, then if you don't actively work on meeting them yourself as an adult, and maybe if you've been abused, for example, it's very hard because you don't have any examples of what that's like. It's very easy to fall into the trap of projecting onto people that they will fill those gaps for you. And that's what limerence is. And so you can see that it's not really just about romance, because if you think about it, people do this in all kinds of situations in their lives, don't they? I mean, maybe you've done it yourself. I know I've had really, really strong limerence in the past. Very strong in terms of romance, with somebody completely unavailable. And I was just in a total fantasy about who they were. And I was in such an amazing fantasy. I could have written a best-selling romance novel that would have been made into a film, and I absolutely know it would, because we've all got limerence and we've all got these wounds. So it would have been very, very popular. um, but we have to have strong awareness of when we're doing that. So I did have the awareness that I was doing it, and I was able to kind of rein myself in a bit and sort of give myself the healing and the love that I knew I was being shown that I needed. So it can be very, very strong, and it can happen with things like, celebrities. And other ways that it can show up is things like world leaders. And so, I've done another video yesterday about how to consciously choose who to vote for in an election, because there's a lot of unconscious behavior comes out when there's an election on, because it triggers these wounds. And the reason why it triggers these wounds is because it's very closely linked to our survival. Because if the wrong person's in power, we are under threat. Yeah, we are under threat, and we've seen that all around the world, because we've seen it happen in other countries and other places. So something that we need to be aware of is that we can also use this form of another form of limerence, drop in the romance, but just kind of fantasizing about, who a person is instead of actually who they actually are. So, we can kind of decide that this person is going to come along and save us from the big baddies in the world. And if I even say that, you can sense the childlikeness in that. And there's an innocence, a total innocence in it. So this is not a judgment at all. There's a real innocence in it that, I personally find that quite adorable. But this innocence can't be allowed to run the show in your life. And therefore, it can't be allowed to project onto people that they're this and they're that and they're the other. Absolutely no relationship whatsoever in our lives should be based on potential, apart from perhaps the relationship with ourselves, of course, where we're, working with our potential to cultivate ourselves into better versions of ourselves as we go along the evolutionary path. But outside of that, nobody else at all. Not, oh, but if they just heal this, they'll be okay. Not, oh, well, they've got these really nice traits. And I think, one day they might have a bit more of them. That's being in a relationship with potential. And potential isn't the reality, and it's not the truth. You've only got the here and now. And if a person doesn't match those needs, the truth of a person doesn't match your needs in the here and now, they're not a match for you, full stop. End of story. It's game over, time over, it's done. Soul contract, ripped up, done and dusted, it's over. And likewise, if a person ever disrespects you, then that is also a sign that the soul contract is over, because whatever you were due to get from the relationship with them, you can get it with somebody else who won't disrespect you, or you can even get it on your own through healing. So we have to have a really strong awareness of when we're drifting into these kind of limerence relationships, ideas about people. It's very prominent with celebrities. That's a really good example, because everybody thinks they know celebrities, or even like things like the royal family, for example. Everybody seems to think that they know them, but we don't know them. We only know the image that we're given of these people. But this can also happen with anybody in our lives. And we just need to have that kind of sense of awareness and checking in with ourselves, is this the truth of the person? Is that who they really, really are? And what they're saying and what they're promising me, are they actually going to deliver that or not? What's the truth of it? What's the reality? And once we know that, then we can make better decisions about who stays in our lives, where we put our focus and our attention, and what to do with that. So I hope that helps you, and I hope it's given you something to kind of ponder and a little bit of awareness and maybe a different perspective on things. And maybe you've gone, oh gosh, yeah, actually, I've done that. I've definitely done it, definitely. Um, and it is something whereby we have to kind of check in with ourselves and make sure that we're not wandering into that territory with anybody. It's actually not fair on them or you. It's not what's best all round. So I'm wishing you all lots and lots of love. And I hope that you liked this video. If you did, please do the like and subscribe thing. I always forget to ask for that. Not very good at asking for that. And if you would like to have some healing with me, as I said, I'm a quantum hypnotherapist and healer. I work with women to help them untie knots that have been holding them back for some time. So if you would like to find out more about that, please visit lunalouiseanna.com and you can find out all about my services there. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a Healing the Patriarchy with Love page, and I also have a Healing Temple of the Light page on there. So you can look up at Luna Louise Anna and you will find the Healing Temple of the Light page. I can't say it. And on there's a pinned post that has a link to my Healing the Patriarchy with Love page. So you can find me there, and I hope that you subscribe and I can do more of these videos with you. And please do comment, interact with me. Tell me about your father wound. Tell me if you've had limerence. Tell me what your thoughts are. Tell me if you learned something new from this. I'd love to hear from you. I really would. Okay, so thanks so much for watching and for listening. You take care and have a really great day. Lots of love. Bye.